Hi guys, welcome to a new video. In this one we're going to talk about Canon's 1.4 50mm lens, but also prime lenses in general. I hope you don't mind not being able to see my ugly mug, but I was in the middle of the city after all, so a face mask was a must. So the 50mm is a prime lens, and what that means is that it's a fixed focal length. Why would anyone choose to be limiting themselves like this? Well, there are a couple of reasons. So, prime lenses are quite the opposite thinking of zoom lenses like the 24-105, which I've reviewed in past videos, in the sense that the zoom lenses offer you the comfort of having such a vast range of focal lengths in just one body, but this one really limits you, but with certain advantages. For example, this doesn't do many things at all. Maybe it just does one thing. There's just one thing that this is good at, but that's the thing. It doesn't do everything but average. It does one thing but better. But don't get me wrong, this is a versatile lens. I'm mainly referring to being stuck at 50mm. And if you want to zoom in or out, for example, well, you just have to move your feet, don't you? That's actually a good thing, it makes you less lazy. So limiting yourself to a fixed focal length like the 50mm or the 35 one is very popular for street photography as well. I think makes you more creative, makes you focus on composition rather than another thing on your mind, which was, you know, the zoom ring and the choosing of a focal length. Yes, I might need a haircut, but more important and more relevant to you might be the fact that a 50mm lens is also sometimes called the nifty 50. This is just further proof of how reliable it is, and not only that, but just how popular and how it's become the default recommendation with many photographers out there. And not only is it reliable, but the amount of quality you get for usually a cheap price is, dare I say, unmatched. This is also very popular with beginner or intermediate photographers, because when you put this lens on your camera body, you'll instantly get that beautiful background blur, which is usually and generally associated with expensive pro level cameras. Oh, dear. And speaking of that, the depth of field is insanely shallow on this lens, so shallow that when wide open, you'll probably have just one eye in focus and the other one and nose blurred, so it can create problems, but that's usually an easy thing to deal with. It has 8 rounded aperture blades which produce a pleasant background blur, aka bokeh. This focal length is very popular for street photography, for portraits, and also 50mm is very close to what the human eye really sees. This is a full-frame lens and it has no image stabilization, but with an aperture of 1.4, what that means is that a lot of light gets through and you probably won't need an IS. The USM autofocus system, which comes from ultrasonic motor, is pretty fast and snappy, especially considering it's a rather old mechanism. It's good for photo, but not as much for video because it's noisy. It has a minimum focus distance of 45 centimeters, which means you won't be doing any kind of macro shots in particular, but you shouldn't expect to either. As far as sharpness goes, it's pretty sharp, but only if you close down the aperture. Wide open at 1.4, it gets quite soft. And not only that, but if you pay attention around the frame, the vignetting is quite pronounced as well, the wider the aperture goes. This lens in particular does suffer from chromatic aberration and purple fringing when wide open. If you have branches, wires, or any other type of details with high contrast in your shot, you'll get this purple or green aura sometimes. However, there are some workarounds for both these issues. In Lightroom, for example, we have this lens correction tab. If you go here, you will find two options: remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. Let's see, for example, how the chromatic aberration and purple fringing looks like, and it's pretty bad. So let's try. As you can see, it's not a whole lot. It doesn't solve everything about this issue. Let's try to zoom in a bit more. Maybe we can see something. So yeah, now you can see some differences when I toggle it on and off. It does improve the situation a bit, but it doesn't fix it entirely. However, it's better than it was before. And as far as vignetting goes, you will have this second option, the enable profile corrections. And as you can see, it fixed it completely. There's no more vignetting. And Lightroom actually recognizes what type of lens you have because this information is embedded in the RAW file. And it's able to completely eliminate that vignetting for you with a simple click. Now, I mentioned that 50mm lenses are usually pretty cheap, and they are. For example, the Canon 1.8 STM lens is $100 compared to this 1.4 version, which is $350. However, there are some differences that explain that price difference as well. For example, the 1.4 version lets in 66% more light. It has a shallower depth of field, it produces better colors, and it has slightly better bokeh. Will you notice these differences? Well, most likely not, unless they are side by side. So in my opinion, the 1.8 version, even if it feels a bit more plasticky, it is a way better value for the money, and it even suffers from chromatic aberration a lot less than this one. This 50mm lens weighs only 290 grams, which makes it really comfortable to carry around. It has a metal mount, and the filter thread size is 58mm. An indication that this is a more expensive lens than the 1.8 one is also the fact that you have your focal distance right there on your lens. Also, the only physical button you have on it is the autofocus on and off switch. I hope you found at least some of the information in this video useful or entertaining, and please leave in the comments below any suggestions or requests you might have. See ya!